Okay, so I've explicated the poem. I've kind of figured out how I want to lay out my paper, and now I'm just going to sort of go through and show you how I structure my paper and how I do my outline. So basically, having flipped the page over, I want to first figure out how I want to hook the audience. And I think the thing to hook the audience with is maybe just a short discussion about true love. What is it? Can two 14-year-olds really love each other, etc. I definitely want to give them a lot of background before I even get to my thesis. They need to know, of course, about Tybalt, right? They need to know about Rosalind, right? Because that's really important leading up to this play. They need to know about his premonition, right? Because he dreamt about this happening before he goes to the party, and he thinks that it's going to lead to his doom. We need to get all that information in there. We also might want to get into the idea that this is important. Well, I think that's enough background, really. Tybalt, Rosalind, his premonition. There might be some other things I want to throw in there later, so let's see. Then I need, of course, to have a thesis statement, so I need to assert something. And I think what I want to assert about this sonnet is that it's important because it's Shakespeare's effort to try and prove that Romeo and Juliet are meant to be together, star-crossed lovers, all that stuff. So I just write it out by having just a rough thesis, by having Romeo and Juliet speak a sonnet in their first meeting. Shakespeare makes, or I could use any active verb, but makes is fine. Shakespeare makes the audience, tries to make the audience, whatever, makes the audience believe in love at first sight. And I can rephrase this once I start writing, as my background might lead me to phrase this a little bit differently when I actually write it. But at this point, at least I have a thesis I want to support. So I want to support this thesis. I'm going to get the audience's attention, my reader's attention, by talking about true love. I'm going to make sure they have all the necessary background to know basically the context of when this is happening and what's going on. I might want to briefly talk about how it's a sonnet, but not get into it too much. And then I'm going to support this thesis. And so I'm going to analyze the passage in support of this thesis. And now I just need to figure out what I want to talk about first. And there's lots of ways you can go about this, but for me, I'd want to get all that sort of technical stuff out of the way first. So I'd probably talk about the sonnet structure first. I'd want to get into the idea that they're finishing each other's thoughts and it shows us true love, and I might use some quotes to show that. That they really are star-crossed lovers, etc. And I also might want to get into the idea that the sonnet's a perfect form, a perfect structure to show the cat and mouse kind of game that's going on. That basically what we have is predator, prey kind of thing going on here. Romeo's sort of stalking Juliet with this crazy religious metaphor, and he's trying to get her, and she's playing hard to get to a certain extent. But they're fated to be together. It's almost like they're magnets and they come together. And the sonnet shows that. The sonnet sort of contains their love and shows how it's like meant to be, and they finish each other's thoughts. And so that might be what I want to talk about. My first body paragraph is how the sonnet structure itself lends itself to making this such an important conversation in the play. Then I probably want to then get into the religious imagery, and we know that it's a religious metaphor, but because it goes throughout the entire piece and it changes and evolves, you can also call it a conceit. So it's a religious conceit, and we're going to want to look at the words profane, and we're going to want to look at the words, that he says he's going to have to pay a fine. We're going to want to look at the words pilgrims, and this is all Q1, and the whole thing, quatrain 1, and it's all trying to get them, he's trying to get her to kiss. This is all about trying to get a kiss, right? And then we're going to want to get into Juliet's twisting of that. She uses words like mannerly devotion, and she highlights this idea that saints and pilgrims, what they actually do, this is all quatrain 2, by the way, what they actually do is, they actually pray, they put their hands together, and so it's okay that he touched her hand. Quatrain 3, it's this, they start playing on this lips versus hands, and don't saints have hands as well, or have lips as well, and all that. So I might want to get into this whole idea that he's trying to say lips should also be allowed to pray, right? And then of course we get the couplet, and we get the pun. And so that pun is, emotionally moved versus physically moved, and very quickly, he's got her in his sights, and I might even want to get into this idea that after that there's sin swapping, etc. Right, etc. All right, so that there we go. Now body 3, what might I want to make body 3 about? I guess I want to talk about how it's essential to the plot. So yeah, maybe I'll move this down here and talk about the, it's essential to the plot because of the kiss, the kissing that happens afterwards, and then get into the sin swapping. I want to talk about Romeo's realization. After this scene, he realizes she's a Capulet. Of course, Juliet, I should also say Juliet's as well. They both realize that they've fallen in love with their enemy. I might want to, at this point, talk about the, Romeo's earlier premonition. Right? And, at that point, maybe I don't even want to mention it up here in my introduction now, because I don't want to ruin that. And how it's, get into this idea that they really are star-crossed, etc. And then I might want to even get into this idea of, and Tybalt has vowed revenge. And maybe even talk about this idea of, which is so important, dramatic irony. We are the only ones who know that Tybalt has vowed revenge, because he speaks to us, and no one else knows. And Romeo doesn't even know that he was discovered at the party, because he was so smitten with Juliet he wasn't paying attention. So that might be what I want to do with my third body paragraph. And in my conclusion, I might want to just talk about, I might want to get into this idea that there's an ensuing tragedy, right? This is going to lead to tragedy, and I might want to get into, what's their flaw? What's the flaw? And I can be open with this. I don't need to decide. Is it that they're youthful and impetuous? Is it that it's really true love? That's what the sonnet's trying to say, so I might want to focus on that. Is it that they have to be a sacrifice in order to end their family's hate? I mean, what's their flaw? Is it that they're blind to that? They're blind to fate? I might want to get into that stuff, I might want to talk about, fate. And is this, what role does that play, and how does this sonnet play into that? Just kind of going beyond into the larger thematic issues in my conclusion. And, I might even want to bring up this fact that I know that, the groundlings, at the end of the play, they jump on stage. And, the play ends with that quote, never was a story of more woe than that of Juliet and her Romeo. So, never a story, ... J and Romeo. I might want to talk about that ending quote, because it does seem like, all along we've been told this was fated to be, it was meant to happen. And so even though the reason why I want to bring up these groundlings is because even though they know it's going to happen, they still jump on stage at the end and say, no, Romeo, don't, in the first production of the play, a groundling jumped on stage and said, no, Romeo, don't, she's not dead. And of course they had to play it off, which is, live theater. And I might want to bring that up because it just shows that even though it might seem unreasonable that two teenagers would fall in love, I think the sonnet is really key to making the audience suspend their disbelief and believe for sure that they really are in love. And I might want to even talk about suspension of disbelief in my conclusion. So now I've laid it out. I still have to write it. I still have to pick my quotes and incorporate them. But I've done the pre-writing that I need to do so I can really do a good job writing a commentary on this passage from the play.